Hello and welcome to everyone who's just joined. We're just letting people come through the lobby and we'll get going in just a moment. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Laura. Good to see you here. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Michelin. Hopefully I've pronounced your name wrong. Please correct me if I haven't.
That's absolutely correct. Good morning.
Good morning. Lovely to have you with us.
Just tucking into my lunch while I do this.
Perfect. As we all should be. We've got about 40 people registered, but no doubt there'll be people who are busy and life gets in the way. So I think we'll just give it one more minute. And then out of respect for all you guys being so timely, we will get going. But we'll just give it a moment while we're doing that. There's just a few little tips here. We will be using the chat window if anyone wants to include questions or comments or say hi to everybody. Feel free to do that. You'll notice in the corner that the meeting is being recorded. What we do with that is, we did this in the last webinar, it worked quite well, is we edit a sort of a highlights snippet and then we'll share that back to all of you who joined us to give you a little snapshot of the key findings. So if you're comfortable with all of that, there's two ways in which you're participating today. It's 12:02 and we've got a bit of content, so I suspect that I think we'll get going and we'll just let people keep rolling in. They're probably coming out of their current meeting, as tends to be the situation in lots of organisations. So welcome to today's webinar. I know you're all very busy and it's fantastic that you could be here today. Welcome, Elena. We've just gotten started, so you're very welcome to join this lovely group of people, and no doubt we'll have more friends along the way. My name's Katrina Tarker and I'm the founder of Cultivate. I'm delighted to be sharing today's research and insights with you that we have developed with Women's Agenda, and are very happy to be able to bring them to you at this point in time in the year, as we all are no doubt doing our strategy and planning for the year ahead. Before we kick off formally, I'd just like to really pause and reflect and acknowledge the traditional owners of these beautiful lands that we're meeting on. I'm coming to you from Camaragal land and acknowledge the First Australians as the owners of those lands that we live, work and learn upon. I will also take a moment just to acknowledge that Cultivate Sponsorship is delighted to be a partner in Cultivate Indigenous, which does also run a specific sponsorship program for Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians. But today's theme will be focused on women and gender equality, in particular in the lead up to IWD, but also just given the nature of the research that we conducted. So a little bit about today, and please do ask any questions you've got. There's the chat function, you can pop them in there, and I'd love for today to be as interactive as possible. What are we going to do? We are going to dive into the survey findings from a piece of research that we conducted with Women's Agenda in November 2024. We're going to explore what those key findings were, what are the barriers that women identified to career progression, and then unpack what that means for us and key recommendations, so that there are very practical actions that both employers and individuals can take forward. It's timely given a couple of different things. It's usually in this period of time that most people I know are doing their planning, strat planning, budget planning, as well as with IWD coming up. So there'll be lots of questions coming up about, well, what can we do? What's changed? What's stayed the same? And we wanted to time this research launch and today's event to give you a little bit of some of those insights that we have gotten. You'll be able to take them away and speak like an expert when someone's drilling you on those topics. So how did the research get done? Women's Agenda, I hope most of you are readers. If not, please jump on and subscribe. It's a fantastic Australian media outlet that is particularly focused on issues that impact women in both work and all of their community and other life. They approached us, we've got for a partnership, and wanted to run a survey of working women in Australia to identify what were the barriers that they had experienced or identified to their career progression. That survey ran for a couple of weeks. We had over 500 responses. And what was really interesting was when I unpacked the data about who they are, of those women, 39% reported being in a management role. 36% said they're more than 15 years into their career, and 23% were in the first up to 10 years of their career. So a really solid representation from quite experienced women, some of whom identified being on a career break. But this research that we're sharing today, the key findings comes from that data set that Women's Agenda was able to obtain from a national sample of women across all sorts of different industries, and we'll be sharing those with you today. I know a couple of people just joined us. Welcome, we have just gotten going, and I've just shared a little bit of background about where the data comes from, and you've come at the perfect time to talk about what did we hear. So the key findings, of which there are many, but we'll dive into, I think, the top couple that really will be the things that are driving what's going on with career progression and gender equality in Australia at the moment. We asked, what are the barriers? Maybe if everyone can have mute, please, we can just hear some fantastic happiness in the background, but it'd be great if you could mute the speaker. Thank you. So we asked the question, what are the biggest barriers you've experienced? And perhaps surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, but the biggest one that was identified by most women was lack of clear promotion opportunities. That was almost half of the women responded that they could not see in their current organisation or in other roles that they had since left, that they could not see the way forward. Second highest of all of them was lack of visibility of them and their aspirations and their career goals in the workplace. And they felt that, you know, almost a third of women found that that had hindered their progression. Now, personally, I love these two pieces of data because when you put them together, I think that tells us the biggest key insight of today. So invisibility is the big word here. So career progression pathways, the way to move ahead in an organisation, women are feeling that that is not visible to them, and they are feeling that their aspirations, their capabilities, their skills and experience are not valued or seen in the organisation. I think if you put those two pieces of the puzzle together, we get a lot of insights about what is going on. Perhaps surprisingly to some of us, maybe pleasingly, some of the factors that I think in D&I world get thought of as some of the traditional barriers were less impactful by the women surveyed who responded than this invisibility factor. So yes, women had experienced caring responsibilities and a lack of flexibility as barriers to their progression, but they were not as sharper barriers or as higher barriers as some of those invisibility issues. Disappointingly, there is still almost 20% of women who report experiencing discrimination in the workplace. So that continues to be a factor despite everything we've been doing for the last 30 years in that area, though it has diminished compared to some of these other factors. What's pleasing, I guess, is those factors are all in the employer's control. So there is definitely something we can do about this. Another part of the research that I absolutely loved was the question around career planning. 48% of all women had a 2 to 5 year career plan. That's almost half. And 14% had even a 5 to 10 year plan. Now that's well over 60, she says, but that's more than 60% of women who have a very clear picture of where they want to be. They do not lack a plan. They do not lack aspirations. However, 36% could not see what the next step was or hadn't actually spent a lot of time focusing on it. What's this telling us? This is telling us that women have long-term goals, but do not have clarity of a short-term plan to get there. And I think that is incredibly important for us to understand as we're wondering what are the high impact strategies that we can build in organisations to make a difference. It really tells us that clearer career pathways are required from both sides. I think this is a conversation for both sides of the fence. This is about what individuals need to see and hear and understand, and also what companies need to be doing and taking accountability for really making those career pathways clear and transparent to everyone in the organisation to ensure that everyone's got the opportunity to really explore their full potential. An absolutely cracker of a question. Who do you talk to about your career aspirations? I love this one. The vast majority of women, 64%, said that they discuss their career aspirations with their friends, probably their girlfriends, possibly over a coffee or a glass of wine or something else. But that is who they talk to. That is who we talk to. This was closely followed by immediate family, but lower than girlfriends or friends. It was 57% of women said that they talk next to their immediate family. Both of those data points are higher than telling someone at work. Only 48% said that they talk about their career aspirations with their immediate manager. Now that's good because it's almost half of the women, but we are telling people outside of the organisation what we want to do with our careers. That is where we're having open and honest conversations. And I think we have to ask why. Now, that might vary from industry to industry, from organisation to organisation, and perhaps it's one of those great questions that you might use in some consultation and listening sessions. You know, what is preventing us? Is it that we don't believe that anyone's going to listen? Do we not believe that people will do something with the information? Do we not believe that it's appropriate? We have heard along the way over the years that we've been operating, many women say that, you know, ambition is a dirty word in this organisation. And it's not okay to speak up. You might be labelled aggressive. Are these factors that are still in your culture and your organisation? I think this data point in particular validates the need for those conversations to be had in our organisations, for us to really understand why are we not making it more easy, transparent, open, comfortable, normalised for women to be talking about their goals at work rather than feeling the need to do that in other circles outside of work. I think what also happens there is that we lose the ability to give people the clues around what women really want. And I know, in the past I've been involved in succession planning conversations, and I've heard people say things like, oh, she's got kids, there's no way she'll move overseas. Now, that's an assumption that someone has made. If people aren't talking about things like that and saying, I would be prepared to go overseas, I'd love to do an overseas, posting, people don't have that knowledge and that awareness, and there's probably a fair degree of bias that's still hanging on to some of the assumptions about what women want to do or don't want to do in the workplace. So key tip here, start talking at work as much as we talk outside of work. We also asked questions about the degree to which people had access to or understood the impact of sponsorship and mentoring on their careers. The vast majority of people, 62%, said that they had never had the opportunity of having a sponsor or being sponsored, whether it was formally or informally, yet most people understood the power of it. More than 72% agreed that it would be a high impact strategy. Most of the women also said that they would take the opportunity to pay it forward to somebody in the future if they had an avenue for doing that. So people understand the impact that it has on their careers or can have on their careers, but the vast majority of people are reporting that this is not something is offered. 21% only believe that their current workplace offered mentoring or sponsorship opportunities. And we all know, hopefully, the incredible power and importance that it has on people's career progression. I think it's one of those strategies that we know in 2025 really, really works. And yet what we're hearing from this data set is that there is a very large degree of people are not able to access these strategies. So again, I think revealing a big opportunity for anyone who is in a position that you can guide what your company can do differently or your organisation can do differently to create real change. So we've got some work to do. If you're here today from an employer's perspective, perhaps you might be here from an individual's perspective. But I think it's crystal clear that employers can play a very, very unique and critical role in supporting women's career progression. Yet only 20% of people, as we just said, believe that enough is being done. So we have a big opportunity here to create those places where these conversations can really happen. And it is probably not going to be a surprise to you that that's one of the major reasons we believe so strongly in sponsorship, in addition to mentoring opportunities, because sponsorship happens within the company. So you are having those conversations with two people in the organisation who have been matched, or you have the power to match strategically to have the right conversations at the right time. And I think that this data set that we're getting from Women's Agenda has really confirmed the need for that in Australia, and the why it is that the time is now for these sorts of interventions. Women aren't lacking capability. They're not saying that they have a lack of sufficient skills or experience. They were options in the survey. I think I'm talking to the converted. Women do not lack the ability or the capability, but they do not have the visibility. And that is a really key finding from this. So we don't need to be offering an abundance of programs, to give women the additional tools and strategies. What we need to do is create strategic moments for meaningful career conversations to take place, where we actually create moments where a senior leader and an emerging leader start to have a robust and honest and transparent and courageous conversation about what's next. There was an opportunity for some additional ad hoc, verbatim comments that Women's Agenda sought out, and a couple of these struck me as being quite important for what we're talking about today. And I think they really sort of articulated the way many people were feeling. This woman shared, she's very well qualified, and yet that is seen as a threat to some. She can't be honest. This would be giving us massive clues as to why she's not speaking up. If she can't be honest and upfront about where she wants to be, despite being in an organisation where they talk about equity and equality, then clearly we can see where that lack of visible pathways forward is coming from. That same person called out the fact that, there are still biases and there are clear limitations on the conversations and knowledge that people have about women's abilities, aspirations, and potential career progression. And I think until those conversations are had, we're not getting the right voices at the table or the right knowledge about what people are looking for. I also loved this other side of the coin. We saw a lot of commentary about the fact that it was actually educating and mentoring the senior leaders and boards to help them to understand the challenges that exist. And I think that is exactly right. It's definitely been the secret sauce that we find that makes the Cultivate Sponsorship Alliance work. It's not only creating a place for the female on the program to feel safe about articulating her career aspirations. It's the person who is listening, and what are they going to do with that knowledge? Not just listening for the sake of listening, but actually becoming enabled and empowered and also strengthened as a potential career advocate. And I think that's what's probably bubbling beneath this other piece, this comment that another woman made in the survey about legitimate opportunities for women to share their ideas, not lip service. So we heard and tapped into a vein that was, there's a lot of talking and not much doing. There's a lot of, box ticking and, window dressing, but it's actually got to translate into action. And I think these feelings, when you put them together, these mindsets really start to dig at the heart of the culture change that organisations need to explore if that is what you're needing to unleash. What are the barriers? Where are they coming from? They're probably not capability barriers, would be an insight that you would take away from this research. I think that they would be those structural barriers around, what are the things that are hindering real career progression? Is it the visibility piece? Is it the opportunity? Is it the conversations? Are we having real career conversations, or are we having more maybe just annual performance related ones where everyone's trying to prove that they did a good job but not really talking about what's next? So I think we get from here a good picture of the experience that quite senior women are having in Australia right now. So what do we do with all of this? How do we turn all of these into actionable insights? How do we do exactly what we are hearing that the women want people to do, which is to do something, not just talk about it? The key recommendations that I would extract out of this, the top 3 things are: build a structured sponsorship program. Clearly, sponsorship is a relationship that happens between 2 people. It can happen informally. I look back at my career and I'm absolutely delighted to now be able to see that there were people who definitely gave me a nudge along the way, had a chat, helped me to sort of see potential that I didn't otherwise see. But we can't leave sponsorship to chance and good luck, because there'll be too many people who then lack the opportunity to have a sponsor in their career. If we build structured opportunities for a sponsorship relationship to take place, you're actually given the keys to be able to target that to the people in your organisation that need it the most. And perhaps as we're sort of going through this material, that could be one thing that you start thinking about now. If you were to build a sponsorship program in your organisation, where would you start? Who would you begin to consider as candidates for that pool? And I think what we're hearing from that data that we just talked about is it's not only starting with thinking about potentially the women on the program and who would benefit from that opportunity. I would start with the senior leaders. Who are going to be the sponsors who need to hear these stories? Who are the sponsors, the senior leaders, the change makers, the influencers who need to learn what is lived experience of people who are different to them in the organisation? So definitely start thinking about your sponsors rather than starting with your sponsorship pool. The importance of that structured program, I think, then is that you give people the tools and the framework for how to do it, not just leave them up to their own devices to have a cup of coffee and have a chat. It actually provides both parties with the skills and experience to build that relationship of advocacy, to have the right conversations, and how to provide career support that is meaningful and also authentic. I think it's really important that people aren't looking for a false start or for a undeserved leg up here. And I think this is probably a different topic for another day, but taps into the whole debate that we're seeing globally at the moment about the merits of D&I. No one's saying give people an unfair advantage, but definitely level the playing field by creating opportunities for that conversation. The second piece I would take away from here as a key recommendation is that it's about fostering a culture of advocacy and visibility. These aren't just things that we do once a year or twice a year because we've been told to do that as part of the performance management framework. We actually have to have a culture and a mindset of advocacy and of really elevating everyone's potential to the table. Personally, one of the things that I really believe in is that everyone in the organisation has potential, but can both people see it? Can the person see it themselves, and can other people around them see it as well? And that needs to be able to come out in meaningful conversations. Once your senior leaders have the words for that, have the knowledge for that, then they have the tools at their fingertips. They have the words, they have the knowledge to be able to genuinely and actively encourage women to step up to leadership roles that they might not even be considering themselves. And this is what will then generate opportunities for women to create pathways. During that sponsorship relationship, one of the things that we really like to encourage people to do is take time to shadow one another, and going to events together, shadowing each other, having the opportunity to explore what a day in the life of each other's shoes looks like is a unique way of giving people that visibility, of taking people into a meeting that they might not otherwise be in, of taking them to an event or an industry conference where they wouldn't normally be at the table. And when you give someone a seat at the table and introduce them and connect them, that increases a person's profile exponentially, and it helps to then demystify what those doors could look like that need to be open, and it creates opportunities to say, hey, I hear that you're leading this great project. I'd love to be a part of it. It creates gateways for those conversations where they don't necessarily otherwise exist. And that needs to be a mindset and behaviour that lives and breathes in the organisation, not just an interim thing that happens every now and again. The third point will be about creating that transparency of promotion processes and pathways. We've got to be talking about this. This can't be mysteries, tap someone on the shoulder stuff. There has to be, criteria for what are the skills and experiences. We need to talk about, what it takes to get ready for those roles and help people to feel confident that they do have the tools to step up, because so much of this is about having that two-way confidence that a person has the ability to do so. I happened to attend the Hatchery Conference, the Women in Leadership Summit last week. I hope some of you guys also made it there. And every single speaker that was there on the 2 days that it ran for spoke about the importance of having a mentor and sponsor. And they all talked about sponsorship as being important. Jacinda Ardern, some of Julie Bishop, the CFO of Bupa, people like that, they all talked about how important it was. And they all talked about the fact that it was that ability to have a conversation with someone to say, you're ready, you should give it a go, and I will support you and I will help you to get through this transition phase. So it's that two-way sort of encouragement. And I loved also that people spoke about the fact that sometimes they had to have that internal business courage to say, let's give this person a chance. They might not be 100% ready, but with coaching and guidance and support, they will absolutely nail the job, and they usually do. So, enough from me. What I would love is to hear from you as well. So, how have you gone about with sponsorship in your either personal career or within your organisation? So, using the chat function, if you feel comfortable to do that, I would love to hear from you. So, has sponsorship been a part of your personal career? Has it been a part of your organisation's impact that you've had on gender equality? How has sponsorship had an influence? Or maybe it hasn't, and this is an opportunity to explore ways to build it in and to bring it to the table in 2025. There is a great question here from the audience as well. What can organisations do to create a more supportive environment where women feel comfortable? That is a great question, because what we want to do is channel those questions that came through that we heard people were having with their friends and people outside of the workplace. We want to have those same conversations inside the workplace. And one of the first things I would say is that they need to happen far more regularly than once a year. That once a year, half an hour or 1 hour conversation really is not enough to encourage people to open up. There's too much focus on 12-monthly KPIs, performance against KPIs, and it's short-term thinking. It's short-term performance and it's short-term planning. But what we need to be doing is creating spaces to talk about 2 years, 5 years. And we heard that most women, or many women, even have a 5 to 10 year plan. But whoever asks about that, have we equipped our leaders to talk about that? And if not, why? Why are we worried about that conversation? So I think normalising this, where do you see yourself, is a really important part of creating that change. Feel free to jump off mute as well. If you've got any questions or insights that you want to share with people along the way, feel very free to do that. Fiona, were you going to jump in there?
Are you am I the only Fiona? Hi, Katrina.
Hi. Yes, sorry.
Excellent.
Fiona McLean.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to see you. Look, I think it's a really great point around sponsorship, and I think, like, you used to reflect on when it's happened to you without the label of sponsorship. And I think when you were talking about it, there's definitely been some people in my life who said you're ready when you don't think you are. But I think it was both the readiness and their willingness to help with that transition. Is really critical to success. And we were in the same company when that sort of happened. And I think it was a material shift, and it was really great. It was two senior male leaders who just jumped in and said, you're doing this, and then announced it at a conference, so I couldn't back out. But, so it kind of made it fun and playful. But I think you're also really, the conversations that we have with our friends and with our family are really important. I reflect on probably this weekend and last weekend we were away with friends. We all talked about career, all very successful women. And I just was question when I catch up with them for dinner tomorrow, how many of you have talked in your workplace around this? So I think they're really great insights to share. But it's really lovely having someone else tell you you're ready. But I think it's so important that you actually look and say, where can I do more or differently? What's holding me back? So I think it's a great program, a great label for this sort of way of thinking about how you progress your career. So.
And I love, the importance of having those conversations with your girlfriends. It's not to say don't do it, but it needs to be almost like a soft practice run for what you're going to say in the workplace. So how can we kind of, even if we're hearing that, coach our friends to say, you are ready, you need to go and say exactly that to your manager or two up, like, go girl, like, I've got you. Because I think, like you said, most people are looking for that sense of bravery and a bit of confidence to get propelled. Hopefully it comes from someone in the organisation, but at least if your girlfriends are kind of training you, then, maybe that also helps.
Yes. Yeah.
And like you, I think there's so many, times when senior men have actually, stepped up and done this for people, and it's really meaningful, and it really, really, just gives both people, I think, the courage and the bravery to give it a go. And that, it's an incredibly powerful experience when it happens, which is one of the reasons why, we certainly suggest pairing senior men to women, but also senior women. This is about gender equality. In Australia, though, I think it's obvious that we have more senior leaders who are men. So we've luckily got a high supply of them, and we'd love for them to be stepping up as sponsors.
Yeah.
You'll see that my team's just popped up a poll here as well while we're having a chat. If you'd like to have these are the same questions that Women's Agenda asks. I'd be fascinated to see if similar sort of themes are coming up. Don't worry, it's going to be anonymous, but you will see the results as well. I'd love to know what your experiences are, whether in your personal experience as an individual, or perhaps you're thinking about it, as a senior leader or HR lead or DEI lead, which I know that many of you are. But what would you see as having been the key barriers that we still are seeing are impacting either other women or perhaps yourself in the organisation? We can see some of the early results coming through. And what are we getting? I think we're getting, visibility, lack of clear promotion options. And it's fascinating that is definitely resonating, as well as, which is a little bit different to our Women's Agenda results, workplace culture and politics. They emerged in the results as sort of like lesser ticked areas, which is why I didn't talk about them in the key insights, but they were definitely things that some people talked about. And that's starting to streak ahead. Meshlin, welcome.
Thank you. I do think that in the workplace, what I've seen is, I've worked across a number of different industries over a long period of time, showing my age. But what I do see is that when women are developed or given advice about how to develop their career within the workplace, it tends to focus on things like networking, your brand, how to communicate, all of that sort of thing. And yet when men are provided with advice or opportunity to develop their skills, it tends to be more of a business acumen and, focus on those harder business skills. And so I think there's a real differentiation between how we actually prepare people in the workplace for their next roles. So when, men are applying or are being considered for that next role, it's like, oh, yeah, well, he did this or he worked on this project, whereas women have done a networking course or, communications or build your brand. So I think we actually need to get more real about what women need to progress, to improve our skills so that we can progress in a business sense, not just our profile.
And I actually love you've raised that, because I think we also need to focus on whether, you know, leaders, male or female, particularly though male, need to have the opposite skill of all of that discussion that women are having, which is the listening part of it. That, you know, don't just focus on that sort of the business skills, because that's what that message is that they're hearing. You just focus on the delivery, the KPI, the delivery, the financial metrics, but are they listening and are they advocating for others? Are they actually being given that as the flip side of that leadership opportunity? And it's interesting, the most common insight that we hear from our sponsors is that, you know, they or sponsorship, it elevated them in their career progression. It just kind of happened, you know, these opportunities that sort of came along and you know, guided them along the way, and then they look back and they go, oh, I see it now. And it's when they see that invisible sponsorship that they perhaps had, that they then become alive to the fact that they too should be doing that. So maybe we could be giving everybody those same sort of set of skills, rather than kind of a left door and right door. Any other reflections people want to share? Great, we'll have an opportunity along the way. Feel free to jump in if you'd like to. So where to from here? You know, what do we want to do with this knowledge and what we've heard? You know, what do we take away, I think, as the sort of compelling actions that we can take? I think I love the things that have already come up today, and, you know, we'll be sharing, as we said, the notes and the slides from today with you. Also, for the people who are joined a little bit late, don't worry, you will get an opportunity to have access to all the same information. And, you know, the crunchy part of this is really, what do we do with it? Now that we know, what do we do with it? I think some of the key takeouts for me are, you know, for employers, we're hearing a call out to create more structured programs. You know, we want to make sure that people have access to them. I love in the comments too that Colette mentioned that some industries have already got structured mentoring available, as well as maybe for those industries who have mentoring, maybe it's adding sponsorship as the next level, because they kind of can complement each other as two separate initiatives that drive two different sets of behaviour. I think that call out around promoting transparency in career progression, as well as fostering a culture and also the leadership skills that are required for advocacy, and also like making things more transparent as opposed to opaque, you know, unpacking, you know, what are the systemic issues that are holding people back from really knowing the way that things happen within the company. And sometimes that's just a size or complexity of your organisation as well. We were doing a kick-off session last week with a, you know, massive construction company in Australia who's also got offices in a couple of other different countries. And one of the pieces of feedback that a couple of the women said when we asked people what were they hoping to get out of the program was they said that they actually just needed a demystifying of the company and all of the different divisions and what happens and the sort of laneways between them. Because when you are head down, working really, really hard and long, like most people are, you don't necessarily have time to, you know, learn the full scope of the business opportunities and operations. So working with someone who can talk to you about that is part of that, you know, demystifying the organisational opportunity. So it's not to say that it's just that we don't talk about promotion. It might just be what are the laneways and pathways that might not be so clear, or what do they even do in that other team if you're not so clear about that. So some work to do there, as well as that helpful tip that we just had, which I think is a really good call out from Echelon around really analyse what you know, programs are we offering, who, and are there any sort of you know, unintended streamlining or gateways there that we need to unpack and make sure that everyone has access to the capabilities that they need to be able to build within their portfolio, you know, of skills that they've got in their suitcase. For individuals, I think we hear a couple of clear clues as well. There are things that every person can do in terms of seeking out a sponsor. We don't want to have to wait until they come to us. It is great when someone speaks up, like your example, Fiona, and I definitely had the same thing in my career where someone kind of started to say, hey, have you thought about this, and be much more sort of active in kind of giving me a, kick up the bum to sort of think more bravely. But we can take that mantle on ourselves. Everybody can take on board, the action that, how do I look out for people? How do I identify what I need and who I want in my corner? How can you kind of assemble in the workforce cheer squad, just like you've got, around the coffee table? You need that same sense of supporters and people cheering for you in the organisation. That is something that people can take on, and we can encourage others to do that around us as well and normalise that, because if we're hearing from people that there are companies where it's not okay to be ambitious, you're really not going to go out there saying, hey, can you be a sponsor for me? So, understanding what's holding people back and then giving people that encouragement that it's okay to seek out a sponsor. I think we've all heard that we need to talk about what we want at work as clearly and loudly as what we might be doing outside of work. And, if you're in a professional role where your role is to create the culture, maybe it's a great opportunity to start with a culture audit or a listening session to find out why people aren't talking more in the company. What are the barriers? What's holding us back? Do we just not think it's okay? Is it not the done thing? We don't know who to talk to? Or something that you sometimes hear is people did that once and it didn't work out so well. Either no one listened, there was no point. So find out why it's not happening and encourage it to happen. And I think something every single person can do in their role, whether you're, at a younger level or a more senior level, if you're an experienced senior leader or an executive, is to have that real pay it forward mentality, encourage others, support others, make it your leadership legacy to prompt other people to, have a courageous conversation or be brave or think more broadly around their aspirations and also their capabilities and have a moment where they feel a little bit more fearless to just go for it. When those conversations happen, we definitely see why and how it works. And I think it is really that, pairing of people that makes the magic happen. And, at the end of every sponsorship program, we collect a lot of both qualitative and quantitative data from people, and these are some of their unfiltered comments that we've heard from people. I think for me, these really reflect why a sponsor, if we're still wondering, why a sponsor is a really important person to have within an organisation, I think these sorts of aha moments and insights are what drives the change. So, and this was, one of the people I was thinking about before, we often hear senior leaders say, I can now look back and see how they've been supported, and they turn that into their personal activator for what they're going to do differently. So they make it, their goal, their leadership legacy to now do that for other people. We had one great sponsor who last year said that he had identified 8 people and he was going to organise a coffee with each one of them and go and thank them and share with them the impact they had. And he'd started and 2 of them had no idea that he even realised that. So I think it can become a real moment in time for leaders to take stock of where they're at in their own leadership journey and lift up from some of that, BAU leadership to that real true people leadership that we all spend a lot of time encouraging them to do. The other thing we often hear is that, it's only through those conversations that leaders get to walk in someone else's shoes who are completely different to them. We sometimes call this reverse mentoring. We can, call it all sorts of things, but it really is that moment to go, wow, this is how a person with different skills, different abilities, or maybe just a different leadership style approaches something. And that's really effective. And actually, why are we not making the most of that on strategic projects around the organisation? So, giving people insights into different skills that they have in the company is really, really important, because it's only when both people see that potential can we create connection points that unleash that potential for everyone. So I'm a big fan of focusing on your sponsors. And, if you're keeping a sort of action plan of what to do next, I'd be starting to plan for which leaders you would like to give them the ability to do this. But, this is a very common story we hear from some of our sponsees, and I think it really resonates with the women's agenda research findings as well. There are a lot of women who report to us that, you know, they're quite happy in their job. It's not like people are sitting there going, I need a promotion or I want to move up, but they're happy in their job because they're working so hard. They're not necessarily thinking about where to from here. Or then they have that, in 5 years I want to be, but I've got no idea what I'm doing in the next 12 months to get there. If that's going on, plus overlaid with this, you know, sort of idea that ambition is not necessarily a positive concept, if people just accept where they're at or that they're doing a good job, and if it's recognised, they'll be tapped on the shoulder and recognised, that is definitely going to be a limiter. And I love it when, you know, at the end of that relationship, when you unite these two mindsets, you get women who report that, you know, they feel like they will consider opportunities even if they're not 100% sure, you know, particularly if they have that person in the corner backing themselves. And one thing that we hear all the time, and I love this because it demystifies leadership in organisations, is, you know, many people tend to have this idea that the senior executives, they've got it all covered. They know everything. They're super confident. They've got this in their stride. And when they have those authentic conversations and hear senior leaders in the business go, I didn't have it all. I didn't know all the answers, but I gave it a go. You know, if both people share some of their self-doubts, then we create meaningful conversations where both people say, I think it's time to give it a go. So that's what we wanted to share with you. I think in the lead up to IWD, you know, as we get, you know, lots of information, we're going to be bombarded with stories and articles and, you know, people pondering, you know, why we haven't had more progress in Australia. And it's an absolute live question. It's a very live question at the moment as, you know, D&I is being talked about, scrutinised, you know, will we still have it this year, etc. I think, you know, this is a really big topic for us, but I think the insights that we get from the Women's Agenda research confirm that, you know, in 2025, this is still something that is impacting working women in Australia today. It's not something that we can push under the carpet. It's not something that we can ignore. And it's not even a D&I thing. I think it's about people in the workplace and how they're feeling, their sense of confidence, their sense of engagement, their sense of whether they are being heard, and that visibility, invisibility word really is, I think, the one big key takeout that we get from this research. So we know that people are feeling that the pathway forward in organisations is invisible, and many people are also feeling that their skills, capabilities and career aspirations are also invisible. That is not a very engaging place to sit, and it's little wonder then that we get a lot of the frustration that many companies face with retention, you know, and that sort of that fatigue that sets in at the 3 to 5 year mark of people in their role, and they go, where to from here? And unfortunately, too many people go, out the door is where to from here. So if you're grappling with, you know, retention strategies, skills shortages, if you're grappling with, you know, having put a lot of effort into leadership development programs or gender equality programs and we're still not seeing the results, I think that there are some clues in here as to new and additional strategies for where we can begin. And given that we heard that only 20% of women felt that these were on offer in their current organisations, there's probably a lot of work for many of us to still do. We promised that we'd let you go on time because you are all busy senior women, and we heard a lot about the impact of work on us, and we've got lots of things to juggle. So I will start to wrap it up. You can access that Women's Agenda article on their website. We'll also be sending out some notes with some links, and stay in touch. And if you'd like to know more, then the team is always very happy to collaborate and talk to you about sponsorship and how it could fit in. If it's something that you're thinking about, we're very happy to book in an initial session and talk to you about how it could be implemented within your context and give you some tips to take away and assist you on that journey, because I'm very passionate about building sponsorship everywhere. I'm online and I'll stay on here till 1 o'clock if you've got any questions. Otherwise, feel free to eat that lunch or go for a walk around the block or whatever you need to do to ensure that you are absolutely at your best for the rest of the day. Any questions, feel free to fire them off, come off mute and ask, or pop them in the chat function. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Katrina. That was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.